Welcome back to Dune. I spent my last 200 hours solo immersing myself in this sandy madness, and I don't regret a single minute playing. However, we need to have a big discussion about the deep desert, future PvP and PvE events that you could be having in the open world, and all of this from the viewpoint of a solo player. Let's first answer the most important question. Was it worth it? Did I get my money's worth? And it's a clear yes. I've had so much fun in the past 200 hours. From the early to the mid game, even into the end game and soloing the deep desert, it has been nothing but joy. Now as we hit the 200 plus hours, more and more problems keep cropping up that we'll address in the second part of the video. We'll first take a look at the Haga Basin PvE, the early game into the mid game to the Dune Aluminum era. From your very first step on, the immersion is real. You walk over the sand and see the war meter popping up, the music starts playing and he pops out of the ground and you're just like, Lord save me. Every single step in the sun, it's scolding you. You're losing your water. You actually gotta make sure that you're on top of it. Build yourself your first blood extractor, bam! Start sucking the blood out of people to process that into water to actually craft stuff, to drink the blood because you don't know how dew fields work yet, that there's an optimal time to actually harvest them, and you actually don't have a dew size in the very beginning. You're gonna spend your first 4 or 5 hours getting used to what the game has to offer with the research stations, the shipwrecks, cutting open the tarps to enter hidden caves and get exploded on by a grenade. While every single worm appearance just stresses me out, still to this day. But then, in the copper era, you finally get your sand bike. And that's where the game opens up so much more. And the game has a couple of stages where it suddenly goes like, wow, that's possible. Because with your bike, you now have to do a very stressful ride over a big stretch from Haga Basin south all the way to the Vermilius Gap. And in the beginning, you'll think, I can't make this drive. And I'm pretty sure the one or the other in the comments get actually eaten by the worm trying to do the crossing. The very best feeling I had in the early game is, get your Calif's Drinker, the weapon that drinks the blood of your enemies as you hit them, and your blood purifier. You suddenly feel like, I got everything under control. I beat my enemies, I discovered the map, I purify the blood, I get water, I can craft things out of iron. We're going somewhere. We're moving in the right direction. Then the game throws you a curveball because you have to build a compactor so you can farm the flower sand for further crafting. And that's a whole different level of stress. Sure, the Vermilius Gap has locations where you can drive on the sand and collect that in relative peace, but you don't know that in the beginning. Drive out in the middle, start pew 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 compacting the sand, you get the worm warning, you're gonna jump on your bike, accidentally drive into quicksand, and start crying probably. It's not like that ever happened to me. I never drove into quicksand while trying to escape from a warming kit. No, that never happened to me. It only happens to beginners, to be fair. And not only do you have to get that flower sand, you also now have to descend into the Haga Rift. From always being exposed to the sun, sandstorms battling you, and the worms popping out left, right, and center, you now yeet your bike off the cliffs right in the bottom below to farm those erythrite crystals that we can work towards our buggy, because the buggy is the next step on everything changes. The Haga Rift is very convoluted because you can go very deep or in the middle. You can farm these refineries. There's also some enemy Arctis cavern base later for ray amplifiers that you desperately need. The problem is, if you have your bike and fully loaded the inventory full with erythrite crystals and you can't store it back again, how do you get out of this thing? How do you get out of this thing? Holy, I have been lost so many times, kicked everything out of the inventory of the bike, stored it back, shake a wire claw, pull myself, until I finally found ways with a buggy that you can actually enter from the side and drive in there to collect everything. But that took me way too many hours. Great, we made it out. We can make our cobalt paste with the erythrite crystals and our silicone blocks. But everything costs water now. Before it was copper ore. Then for iron ingots, it was some water, but that was good with blood purification. Now steel takes twice that amount, and we need tons of steel. Because we want to craft our precious buggy, and that would be 30 steel ingots and 30 and 30 and 30. It's quite expensive. But it's going to be worth it for that absolute amazing buggy cut array, which farms more carbon and erythrite than any cut array you can make to that point. And if you upgrade to the MK4, you get that aluminum save as well. What do we naturally do to solve this problem? We follow the main quest line to go through trial after trial after trial, following the steps of the Fremen. And at the very end, you finally are able to sacrifice humans for water. The death stills are such a cool thing. You go from hitting your enemies and having to suck the blood out of them to simply collecting their bodies, filling up a chest with said bodies, and simply deposit in the destil to after an hour get 25,000 water. That amount sounds so much at the given time. And in the hour it takes to make that water, you just discovered the map, you do some quests, you gather some more materials, you get yourself the array amplifiers, the servox you need, you go into a research station to get the advanced servox and the particle capacitors to then be able to get your buggy. And I don't think I'm overdoing it when I say the buggy changes everything. You have been doing farm trips where you filled this 175 inventory of your bike and your inventory. Now you have a buggy that has a 1,500 inventory. You go for an aluminum run and your buggy's full. You suddenly have more aluminum than water. You've never had this issue before. It was always like, cool, like one load of my buggy can be crafted with all the water I have. Now you have so much material that you need to actually build your second destil, and maybe your third and your fourth destil to actually keep up with all the crafting that you can then work towards the ornithopter. And as soon as you get the ornithopter, the whole world opens up. You can move into the Dure Aluminium era. You can go to the shale with the radiation suit and your ornithopter. You can do quests everywhere over the map. Can land on buildings on the tippity top to just jump down inside and grab yourself that blueprint chest. Farm runs for Mark 5 gear in Haga Basin. That's the equivalent of Mark 6 gear that you get in the deep desert. So good. Again, a whole different game. And then you get to the deep desert. First, the arrow is kinda interesting. From A1 to A9, you only have PvE, unless you land on a shipwreck. You get those research stations, you get caves. It's very relaxed. You get your first taste of what's to come. But as soon as you leave the B row, that's open world PvP. Everyone could try to jump down your throat and choke you while you just want to get yourself titanium and stravidium fibers to make yourself plastanium. And not only do you need plastanium, no, suddenly we also need spice melange for crafting. And if we're looking for the difference, it's quite crazy. In the aluminum era, it was 45 ingots for one storage container. 125 steel for a medium ore refinery. Okay, seems good. You get the spice refinery for 160 Dure aluminium. It's fine as well. But the medium spice refinery already costs 285 plastanium ingots. Almost double of what the first building cost. Your large ore refinery is 380 plastanium ingots. Over the medium ore refinery with 125 steel. 125 steel is easy. Takes you like nothing, not even 30 minutes to get. Going for 380 plastanium ingots is going to take me significantly longer with 540 silicone blocks. Now that being said, the last tier of crafting is quite interesting because it makes things cost less resources. Usually a silicone block is 5 flour sand and also 3 erythrite crystals for a cobalt paste. So that gets cheaper as I actually get the final big refineries. Still though, the resource cost is crazy and you need spice melange on top of this. As a solo player, you're pretty much forced to build yourself a small base in the deep desert because building cost is 50% discounted in the deep desert. In the PvE area already, in the A row. I built myself a tiny base, I can get that medium spice refinery cheaper and all the other buildings I kind of need to make myself spice that I don't have to pay full price outside. This speeds up the process, but you gotta destroy your base every week because of the Coriolis storm and then rebuild it and destroy it. It's kind of fine because it's an endgame loop, but it's still also somewhat painful that you're forced to do it. Now to the question of PvP and how does it actually feel in the deep desert? And this is where the game can be ruined or great depending on your server. My server is not a pacifist server, but relatively chill. In my 30, 40 deep desert runs, where I've gone for spice, plastanium, stravidium, all that kind of stuff, Mark 6 research stations, I've had 2 PvP encounters where people really wanted it. They wanted to hunt me down, they wanted to fight. That's it. Now, friends of mine and Australian players have told me there are big guilds on their servers hunting. 32 player guilds that at any time of the day have some people online that will hunt you down. You fly out of the A row, you get killed by 3 ornithopters trying to smash you. You have 10 people just bullying one player. And that obviously feels horrible because you can do nothing about it. You can simply just stop playing the deep desert. Or find yourself an own guild. But not every one of us wants that. There's a reason we often play solo because it's just a good fun experience, especially in a survival game. And the survival to this point has been good. The loop to this point has been great. But if you're unlucky and you get a, let's call it a shitty server, you might just want to stop playing the game at this point, or only hang out in the Haga Basin and be happy with Mark V loot, get all Mark V blueprints, and forget about Mark VI. Now, obviously, this is a choice to play solo, so you gotta live with your choice, and it might just be that you can't get Mark VI loot. What I think they should change, personally, is I want open world PvP events on top of the Deep Desert. Because right now in the Deep Desert, you have to fly out with your Orni, and you're just at the grace of whatever big guild wants to screw with you or doesn't want to screw with you. Again, your server could just straight be ruined by one guild. The overworld currently, the area between the Deep Desert and the Haga Basin and Arakeen and the Harkin Village, that one is empty. There's nothing there. Fuel depots, water depots, that's it. But what if we had ship crashes there? Actually in the overworld, where people get a warning, there's a ship crashed. Then you can just fly there with your ornithopter, jump out, and it's an instanced area where I guess X players per instance could get in and fight in there for loot as well, for blueprints, for Stravidium, Plastanium, Titanium, whatsoever. But it's a smaller scale where even as a solo player, I imagine it a bit being like Marauders or Escape from Tarkov-ish, where you get into the shipwreck, right? You run through, you do the PvP that you do, you get your stuff, and then you just try to escape it. That would give solo players more of a chance to actually survive, and also a chance to take out one or two other opponents, 3 or 4 other opponents. Rather take them out than get smashed by Ornis. Because in an Orni battle, 1 ornithopter versus 4 ornithopters, you're not going to win. Unless you're the one. You're him. You're the chosen, right? There are ways to make this more accessible for everyone. Dune wants the Deep Desert. The devs want the Deep Desert to be the Deep Desert. May that be as it is, okay? But giving solo players and PvE enjoyers not a single option other than the Deep Desert to go into Mark VI gear feels kind of terrible. There is, for example, Stravidium and Titanium in the B row and in the C row. So you don't have to fly all the way out to D, E, F, G, H, I for these resources. The problem is that in B and the C row, there's maybe 1 or 2 nodes per block. So C6 might have 1 single Stravidium node and 1 single Titanium node. Whereas C5 might have 2 Stravidium and then C4 has 2 Titanium again. And then you go for the E row or the F row where there's 20 in one of these blocks. Maybe increase the B and the C row Titanium, Stravidium a bit. Then you can at least get the resources, not necessarily the blueprints, but at least the resources to get yourself a Mark VI helicopter, Mark VI buggy, something. And not just be completely allowed to exist in the endgame. But I'll stick to my prior opinion. I'd like more instance types of PvP, PvE. Some kind of either PvPvE dungeon or a PvE dungeon in itself for PvE players that are accessible over the overworld. One big ship crashes, people can enter and go for loot. There's a ruin opening up, a Fremen ruin full of traps and stuff. You can go in to get yourself things. Maybe compete even against other players, so it's PvE. But the loot is still instanced for all the people that entered, which means boxes might be empty because you're too late, but you could still find a box somewhere hidden around a corner, potentially or not. But more instant stuff would be fun over the full open world Deep Desert experience. And leave that still for the big guilds that then want to drop their spice harvesters that I personally as a solo player will never own. Currently the game has a big disconnect. Everything in the Haga Basin feels good and is fun. I've been having an S tier experience right up here until you hit the Deep Desert. And then really depending on your server, you suddenly go from, wow, this is great, to big sigh. Someone send help. I'm not enjoying myself anymore. That being said, to this point where you reach the Deep Desert, you can spend 100 hours. You can even spend 200 hours in Haga Basin, going through all the quests, really discovering every nook and cranny, crafting yourself the Aluminium stuff, getting the Mark VI blueprints. And then if you figure out that the Deep Desert is terrible, you're like, well, good job. I had 200 hours of fun. Goodbye, Funcom, until the patch is coming out. And that's what we're currently hoping for. We're hoping for meaningful, good patches. There's more PvE storyline plan. There is more stuff in the overworld plan, balanced patches, making the PvP better. The Deep Desert is sadly staying open world PvP. Yet though, they have already held an AMA. They have already given us feedback. And we're now hoping for good, meaningful stuff down the line. The base construct of Dune Awakening is great. The execution of the endgame is lacking. And I'm even asking, where is this for? Because on a 200 player deep desert, there's maybe 10 people having fun then, or 20 people having fun, while the other 180 are like, yeah, thank you. I can't be bothered. I'm not interested. What do you think? How are you feeling? I got my money worth. I'm very happy. I've been enjoying myself. I'm even going to start a complete new character to do a speed run from the early to the end game. But I would like to hear from you, how you've been enjoying yourself, how you've been having fun, how you see the game, and how many hours you especially put in. If you're now looking for a very good base spot, or even for your very own deep desert base, enjoy and have a fantastic good time on Arrakis.